Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for the first volume of the High Republic Marvel comic. So this is Marvel Comics Volume 1, which is issues 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So we're actually going kind of further back in that, like, I suppose this effectively is like wave 1 of the comics. In terms of like when it actually plays out. This is the interesting thing in that, like, the novels obviously get released, you know, more or less all over the same like week or two. They usually have like one of them a little bit more offset, but for the most part you get sort of 3 novels at once, then you wait 4 months, you get more novels. Whereas the comic did release monthly over the course of the run. I believe it just wrapped up. I suppose it's phase 1 story with issue 15, which obviously I haven't read that. I've only read this first volume here, so that's going to be interesting, just knowing that, okay, I only have like 3 volumes to actually go through. So what does this one do? Obviously we're not quite at Fallen Star yet, in that this one, from what I can tell, basically all of it takes place just after the events of Light of the Jedi, in that one of the, I suppose, major plot threads is Jedi Master Skier here being missing the arm from the battle that happens at the end of Light of the Jedi. That's sort of one of the main sort of plot threads of like his kind of PTSD effectively surrounding that and how it has affected him going forward. And the 3 characters on the front here are effectively the 3 main characters in the comic. We have our sort of Padawan, who very quickly becomes Jedi Knight, Keeve Trennis, Jedi Master Skier, and then Avar Kriss, of course, everyone knows. The story for the most part focuses on the Drengir, which I do appreciate, because me, who's mainly only read the novels up to now, the Drengir really only get focus in like Into the Dark, the first YA novel. I think Race to Crash Point Tower briefly mentions them as like a connection there, but for the most part they're just sort of, the mention of the Drengir is sort of like in the background. They're being fought off by Avar effectively, I think referencing the comic. So I've always wanted to check out the comic to see like what's actually going on with that stuff. And obviously this is just the intro to it. They don't do too much for the most part with it. It's more of just, okay, here's the comics sort of first look at the Drengir and the first engagement and how they get out of that situation. There's a few more interesting dynamics in how it relates to the characters, but that is effectively kind of what happens here. So in that sense, I'd say like I enjoyed the 5 issues that we had here, but they didn't like blow me away or anything like that. I think it was overall like, it felt stronger than say the manga. I was very surprised that the manga was actually maybe, I think, one of the weaker kind of mediums so far for High Republic. Hopefully that will improve with volume 2 of the manga. But this was good. I liked Keeve Trennis as a character, and that unlike some of the other characters, they kind of placed her in a little bit of an interesting situation where, like, say, Wreath, it's taken like the majority of the way for him to basically become a knight. I think Belle is effectively also just at that point now as well. But with her, like, Vernestra's already been a knight and has a Padawan. But with Keeve, you see her basically just sort of do her trial, something else happens. She actually ends up doing quite well in sort of how her trial ends up getting like kind of distracted, and she still gets knighted because she is seen as being very, very skilled and talented. So you kind of deal with, she's just become a knight, but suddenly all these issues start happening kind of surrounding her master Skier, who he's kind of the one who ends up in a way sort of having most of the arc here, in that a lot of Keeve, it's her obviously becoming a knight and being the sort of sensible one of the two, while Skier is definitely struggling with sort of his emotions, his anger, surrounding just a lot of things. You obviously get the whole dynamic of he was injured during the space battle with the Nihil at the end of the book. He lost an arm. And even though the Trandoshans can regrow their arms, it takes time for that to happen. So he does only have one arm currently, and he constantly has sort of flashbacks to that moment. They ultimately reveal over the course of the comic that it's not so much just that moment of what happened. That is part of it. But part of it is just that he feels like his connection to the Force is diminishing. It's quickly becoming weakened and not as strong anymore. And he struggles with how to sort of talk to Keeve about this. And that informs some of his actions in terms of like making decisions that seemingly go against most of what the Jedi would actually do throughout this book. Like the first issue is very sort of introductory in that like it ends effectively with the the dedication ceremony for Starlight Beacon. So that's a kind of cool moment in terms of like I think we saw. I believe this happened at the end of Light of the Jedi. I'd have to read the end of Light of the Jedi, but we saw kind of some of that stuff there as well, and it's nice to sort of get that moment kind of here at the end of the first issue with a lot of the Jedi there, and me reading this now, shortly after Fallen Star came out, you know, it has impact that we really at the start of this era were focusing on. Starlight Beacon is now fully up and running for the first time properly. And we're dealing at the end with the loss of this beacon. It kind of helps bring the whole kind of group of books together here. After that, we do go more into the actual sort of mission that involves like more of our core group of characters, which is Keeve, Skier, and then the two Jedi twins, Terek and Saret. Whose names obviously are just kind of reversed effectively, the letters kind of backwards. The dynamic with those two is that they're like kind of bonded. They're, what's the exact wording they say here? The Katabi identical Bond twins who for all intents and purposes share the same brilliant mind. And you get this interesting dynamic where if one of them gets hurt, the other feels it. And they really sort of play on that idea, and they use it as part of the plot as well, because one of the key things that happens is that very early on upon landing on the planet, one of them gets taken by the Drengir. Their twin is feeling what's happening and relaying to our characters the sort of intent of the Drengir because they have that twin bond. So that ends up actually working out quite well. I was worried those two characters would be more kind of gimmicks, but they actually do a little bit with them. They definitely don't right now have the strongest, you know, like character arc where they stand out as individuals all that much, and it is very much, you know, everything we're doing with them kind of has to focus on the idea that they're twins and they can kind of sense what's happening to each other. That's all kind of like, you know, fine. It's still early days. It's only five issues in, but I was definitely wanting just a little bit more out of them than that. But I also accept that in 5 issues, what they did was mostly focus on the dynamic with Skier introducing us to Keeve, and Avar also being a bit of focus. You know, you get other Jedi here, like Maru, they also kind of go back to talk to from the base. You get to see Orba Lynn for a bit. So like Orba Lynn's quite fun, of course, because that character had a fun sequence in one of the books. I forget which one it was, but you know, lot of interesting stuff there. But yeah, they quickly land on the planet. There's a few interesting dynamics going on here. There's actually some stuff with the Hutts that's quite interesting, in that on like a station they find this kind of dead Hutt, and it's clearly been attacked by the Nihil. When they get down to the planet, you get this idea that, ooh, why is this weird guy the representative of these people? They're growing kind of some sort of barley, which is a key component of Bacta. Some of the world building was actually quite decent, and you get the idea that, oh, he's actually secretly kind of in league with, he's made a deal with the Hutts that he isn't telling them about, and he knows that the Drengir have taken root on this planet. And there's a cool moment as well, like, where does that scene actually take place? Where they just do the sort of like Drengir recap. That felt like one of the strongest parts of the book overall for me. Just seeing that recap, and I think that was where they also did the thing where they connected it to Into the Dark, in that they brought up like, yeah, here it is. So yeah, we get the whole idea, waking her from her slumber. Yeah, the Great Progenitor is introduced. This is cool because on this page, you get what was sort of presented in Into the Dark, which was the allusion to the fact that the Drengir were basically defeated by the Sith. And you get that here. The harvest was abundant, the harvest was plentiful. Others saw our power and reaped alongside us, working together for the greatest gain. But nothing lasts forever, so soon they betrayed us, as was their nature. Soon they paid the price. Fearing they could not kill, they plotted against us. They trapped the first of us within their totems, forcing her to sleep. And while the Great Progenitor slept, we slept also beneath the ground, until the traveler stumbled upon the Progenitor, waking her from her slumber. So it sort of, I suppose, connects into Dark, explaining what's going on. I don't remember them referring to what happened in Into the Dark as being sort of the Great Progenitor. Maybe the later references to the Drengir more reference that, but I think it was ultimately stemming back, linking into the comic a bit. So that's cool. I like that lore. Anything that references the Sith during this High Republic era, I find very, very interesting. I am wondering, will they do anything with that, or are we going to have to wait for the show, The Acolyte, which I think is meant to be set in the High Republic era? And the only thing I can think of with Acolyte is sort of Sith. Because obviously the idea is that they have to be hidden during all of this era, because only in the prequels and Darth Maul's kind of public appearance are the Sith, publicly kind of outing themselves again. So that sort of, backstory with the Drengir is kind of cool. So I'm guessing the Great Progenitor will be brought more into the sort of focus, into the spotlight, as I suppose our characters here actually figure out some sort of a way to deal with the Drengir and kind of, I suppose, prove the idea that if the Sith could defeat them in the past, the Jedi should be able to defeat them now. And how do you actually do that? Because the trick with them is that they're difficult to defeat, and that if you slice them up, you basically just make them multiply, and all these sort of ideas. But the main thing that happens here is obviously that people are getting sort of like trapped and taken by the Drengir throughout all of this, and it's a lot of our characters' first time like encountering the Drengir, which for me, having read other stuff, I've already seen sort of the introduction of the Drengir, and I'm looking for more for the in-depth stuff. We effectively get to this situation where it seems like Skier has like purposefully like handed over himself to, for the Drengir to control. And you get this kind of like cool look for him where he's got his arm replaced with like a Drengir vine arm, and he's fully acting as if he's the new like disciple of the Drengir. But he then later reveals that he let himself kind of fall to kind of gain their trust to eventually turn the tables on them. And so everyone does eventually get freed from, being captured by them. But this infection has had a negative impact on Skier. He can't just like immediately reverse this dynamic because it's now part of him. The Drengir arm, the aspect of Drengir, he's connected to like the hive mind that is the Drengir. That's not going to go away, and this sort of adds on to what he's already dealing with, and just makes it worse. So you really see the idea of like kind of like Skier beginning to really lose his mind. A lot of his like aggression. You already got the sense that he was somewhat of an aggressive Jedi in the first place. That's just being further amplified in that there's a scene earlier on in the book, before even the Drengir stuff I think properly gets introduced, where they find the Nihil guy that's still active, and he just absolutely murders him, just like cuts him in half, no problem. It was very much that sort of Elzar moment from Fallen Star type thing, and he is criticized quite heavily for it, and that they definitely could have overpowered this Nihil guy, no problem, but Skier just kind of cut him down like that. Other moments, just looking through it here. Vernestra is in this book for a little bit, as is Imri, but they are very much just sort of like quick cameo appearances. They make sense to be here. I think they're dealing with what's happening on Starlight, I think. Yeah, because they end up, the corpse of the Hutt, they end up sending to Starlight for sort of an autopsy. It then is revealed to also have sort of Drengir, sort of like seeds effectively in it. So there's a threat of like the Drengir on Starlight as well. And so you get Vernestra and Imri just for a little bit. It's, again, fun to see more visual stuff with Vernestra, but there's not too much to say there. The other thing with the Hutts is that linking into, again, the guy, what's his name, Suleiman, I think, or something like that. It's revealed, like, obviously, like, he has a deal with the Hutt cartel. And the leader of, I suppose, them here comes into play. And we get to see this, I think for the first time, like, a properly, like, active Hutt, Mayarga the Merciless. And this character is kind of cool. Like, it's a Hutt with, like, you know, arms, armor, who actually seems like active and some sort of a warrior. And what I like about what they kind of end up do here is that they pull a little bit of a twist on the whole, oh, it's just the sort of thugs coming into play here. Here's the villains. But then they sort of realize, no, there's a bigger threat here. We need to work together, because they start to hear reports that, like, all across the system, all these different planets are beginning to get overrun by the Drengir. That we can either have this minor dispute over this planet here, or we can work together to try and find some way to help all of these planets. Because I think they even addressed that, like, Nal Hutta is also being overrun by the Drengir also. So this character wants to fix that. So any solution is good for kind of everyone in all of this. They temporarily stop this kind of rampage by Skier kind of regains his senses for a little bit and is able to talk to Kiev and effectively tell her you have this ability to sort of basically mind touch people and see the sort of connections in things. So I'm connected to sort of the Drengir kind of root mind. You connect through me and effectively communicate to the Drengir that all of the people you are trying to eat and consume are, like, unclean. They will kind of ruin what's going on here. We are not edible. So she does that, and the Drengir kind of begin to retreat, and it seems like for now the threat has more or less abated. It does end very quickly, like it's in the space of like 2-3 pages. We go from like, it seems to have worked, I guess, but then obviously cliffhanger ending is that it seems like Skier might be dead. Now, I believe from other stuff, I know that Skier isn't dead. So I know going into issue 6 and stuff like that he's not actually completely gone here. But it's an interesting cliffhanger to see in that, like, if they did use this as the death, I think it actually could have worked. That they, I think, done a decent amount with the character arc for Skier throughout this, of just this being this kind of heroic sacrifice here. He's losing his connection to the Force, but here's sort of the last thing he can do. He's trained his Padawan to become a knight, and she is assisting him with this final act that he can do. That would be nice. But the fact that I know that there's more of the character makes me interested to see where they go with regards to a kind of Jedi character who I suppose if he does recover from this is going to need, or he's going to probably want to try and redeem himself for some of his actions and some of the things that he was forced to do here. Because there's just that sense that, like, he didn't communicate particularly well with Kiev, and now he needs to make amends for that. Anything else throughout this that I particularly want to mention? I don't really think so for the most part. Other than to say that, look, 5 issues in, I thought it was solid, decent. The Drengir story is one I do want to see where it goes, because it looks like by the fact that it isn't really mentioned much in a lot of the other books that I did read, it gives me the impression that this comic does deal with it for the most part. So I want to see how that sort of resolution happens. And yeah, I suppose maybe Avar was interesting in that she, towards the start, because Kiev is more of the main character, she's more used as, again, sort of like they communicate with Starlight, and she's there, running things as the marshal. But she does join the action, so for like a little bit. I don't think we get like a massive amount with her over the course of this book, in that they get captured pretty quickly because of the whole plan with Skier and what's happening, and you see her kind of being more involved in the action, which is good. But I'm guessing she'll get more focus as we kind of move on, especially I suppose later on in the comics, where we get to sort of post-death of death of Stellan is in book 3, so it depends on how they do the timeline, I suppose, surrounding some of the later issues. But it is interesting just to see that this is a character who kind of hasn't been in much focus since Light of the Jedi. And even in the comic, where she is sort of like of the main 3 like masters, she's still only a little bit in focus here. There's a small bit of Yoda towards the start, when like he and one of the other Grandmasters comes in and tells Avar that she's going to be the Marshal of Starlight Beacon. So that's always kind of fun to see, in that this era of the comics does have multiple Grandmasters who were mentioned in Light of the Jedi. And we do get to see one of the other ones. Grandmasters Veter, V-E-T-E-R. You can see the 2 of them there on this panel here. So he looks kind of cool. I guess, I think there's another Grandmaster, if I remember correctly, from Light of the Jedi. They mentioned there being 3, I think. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but always like to see more of the council members. And Yoda's just here to sort of get across that, like, no, I'm not coming back to the council. I'm still doing stuff on the Starhopper, which is the plot from the IDW comic, which is one I will get to. I think probably sometime next week I'll review volume 2 of the comic, which I do have just here. So volume 2 I do have, which covers up to issue 10. Volume 3 is not out yet, but I think it's coming out next month. And I do have volume 1 of the IDW comics, and I think volume 2 is already out. So I'll be able to get those and review them as we build up to, I guess, in terms of, we'll have a little bit of a gap until the new High Republic stuff comes out, I think in October. I think it's October anyway. But obviously Kenobi in May I will be reviewing on the channel. So, continuing the Star Wars stuff, catching up with all the High Republic stuff that I can. But, other than that, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the first volume, the first 5 issues of the High Republic comic. What were your thoughts on it? But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.